gosh, thanks. About it. We're gonna get it. We are gonna get it. You're gonna get it. You're gonna get it. So yeah, feedback though is the way you grow as a teacher. Outside, if you really think about when this ends, you learn by continuing teaching. You learn by continuing to practice, and you learn by taking continuing ed. Okay, but those are three very different modes of learning. So when you do continuing ed, you're gathering tools, you're gathering resources. When you practice teach, when you practice yoga, you're prepping those resources. You're sharpening the tool. You know what I mean? Have you ever heard the whole thing with the stone cutter? Like, part of their job is to keep the tool sharp all year long. And if you're not practicing, you're not keeping the tool sharp. And then the most important thing is where those two things meet in the middle, which is actually doing the thing and teaching. And this is where feedback comes in, because this is the only place you get the feedback. And so once you all start focusing on giving feedback, we're going to use the music playlist tonight as a little exercise for feedback. We're going to use the bio. And then we're going to look at the metrics. Have you guys gone over that in terms of how you'll be kind of reviewed or evaluated on Teach Out Day? Yeah, right? Okay. So we'll look at that a little bit more in depth. Okay. Good. All right, so who knows what imposter syndrome is? Have you talked about this much in training? Yeah? Where do you sit with this concept? You feel it all the time, you resonate with it? Who struggles with imposter syndrome? Okay. Who will struggle with it? All of you, everyone. But that's a good thing. That's a healthy thing, because what imposter syndrome does is it lets you know what you don't know. And you should always be entering every class you teach with a healthy dose of preparedness around what you do know, but open to learn about what you don't know. And it's a really difficult thing, because teaching yoga is an extremely vulnerable thing, right? I mean, let's just take a step back, pull the scope out. When we're teaching yoga, one of the things we're doing, we're allowing students come to us without much dialogue. Like, we're not getting a lot of intake from them. We get a moment at the front desk, like, hey, how are you doing today? And what's the answer? Fine. Is this where the studio is? And they go in with their mat. So we get no read, really. Like, you can read their body language a little bit. If you've been working with the student for a while, you can kind of see how bright their eyes are that day, or maybe they look tired, or maybe they look sad, or maybe they'll confide in you a little bit. But ultimately, you don't have much to go on when your student shows up. And so essentially, you just have to hold space for them in a way that allows the magic of yoga to happen. That piece of the bio that you wrote, the special sauce, right? And one of those things in there is to allow your students to find a sense of empowerment within yoga, and also find where the yoga meets them and all the rest of it. So then what happens after the class is over, right? What do? You go, thanks for coming. How was class?
Great. Bye.
Come back next week then. And that is it. That's the feedback you get from students. So generally speaking, your students aren't going to be a valuable resource for you to gather data around your growth and development as a teacher. Do you know what and it's ironic too, because there's an actual thing called the Dunning-Kruger effect. Anybody familiar with this?
I know the name.
You've heard it.
Yeah.
And it might come clear as I explain it. So the Dunning-Kruger effect is this study they did where they found that people who were more experts in a specific subject had a more humble opinion of their own knowledge around it. So if you go into a very complex subject matter, the more you learn about it, whether it be astrophysicist or yoga or whatever it might be, the more you learn about it, the more it kind of puts you in a place where you're like, oh my God, I don't know anything, right? Versus when you're brand new to something, you have a bit of this kind of naivete, this kind of youngster attitude, like, oh, I know all this stuff already. Like, I know how to sequence, I know how to do all these things. So the less you know about the subject matter, the more you think you know. The more you actually know about subject matter, the less you think you know. And so that's really interesting, because who are the people you want feedback from?
The people that feel like they know less about it.
Yes. You're going to get more valuable feedback from them. So this is going to bring up something called subjective and objective feedback. Okay. It's probably fairly obvious what the difference is. Like, what is objective feedback? Objective feedback, you were talking about Austin's class. Who was it? You missed the left side, right? So that is objective, right? There's no opinion around that. Like, he did not do the left side, even though sometimes you'll tell a teacher, hey, you missed the left side. They're like, no, I didn't. And you're all, thank you. So that, by the way, that's a good reminder. Even if you forget the left side, class was still good. Say it louder. Say it from the rooftops. Even if you mess up, class can still be really good, right? Yeah. So what then, if that's objective feedback, which is quantifiable, it's quantifiable, then we have qualitative feedback or subjective feedback, which this is really where this Dunning-Kruger effect is very important, right? Because subjective feedback is my personal opinion, right? Whereas like this student may tell you after your class, I loved it, it was so great, right? And you're just like, cool. And that's all they tell you, because also the novice or the unexperienced won't have much to say. They generally won't have much else to say other than very kind of minimal feedback versus somebody, like a teacher. So one of the things that happens when you're an intern here is that you get paired up with a mentor. So like Erica might be your mentor, or Rich, or Kristen, or Rebecca, and they come to your class, and it takes a bit of an attitude shift to go from beating the imposter syndrome, because we have to believe in ourselves that we know what the hell we're doing enough to get over our own doubts and feelings of fear around doing it. But by the time it's over, you have to put that aside and put that down so you can receive feedback. Do you understand how that could be definitely a blockage? That the same confidence building you do to get over the hump of imposter syndrome to produce the performance of class, which, let's be honest, teaching yoga is a performance. I don't mean it's inauthentic. I don't mean it's like manufactured or pretentious or manipulative, but it's performance like you brush teeth, right? It's a performance. You're performing an act. You're doing a thing. And sometimes to get there, especially in the beginning, you have got to kind of hype. You have to be your own hype man. You know what I mean? You got to be like Kanye West's mom, and you're Kanye, and you're Kanye. Okay, she was the best hype man in the biz. So let me ask you this. So you build up this little bit of confidence to get over the hump of imposter syndrome, which is the resistance. Does your level of effort, what does your level of effort have to do with the outcome of class?
Any effort, class isn't going to be great. Is that what you're asking?
I love this dialogue. Let's talk about it. Who else agrees or disagrees with that? let's say you have a bad sequence, but you try really hard, right? Or your cues are confusing, but were you?
I think then it gets into this level of effort of the teacher. So what does that's different for every individual teacher, for every individual moment in the class. And I mean, every moment in the class. And so, everyone at every moment you have definition of effort. And on the reverse side, how that effort, how does that affect your students? They will have their own objective or subjective donor effect, whoever's in there. And that's going to happen at every single moment within that class.
Yeah,
That makes sense.
it does to you. I'm a little foggy on it, but I think we've said it. I think on one end of things, it is important to be there in terms of your full availability in terms of effort. But at the same time, like what Nathan was saying, I'm paraphrasing, but if you try too hard to control the outcome for the student, then you are actually going against the whole process of what yoga is for. If I'm there to hold space for you, but I'm saying, but let it end like this for you, right? Like I've got a grasp on your experience that really I'm then now getting in the way of your ability to let yoga serve you in the way that it needs to authentically for you. So it's really, so now we've kind of dissected two really difficult things around teaching. Is the amount of vulnerability you come into it with that you have to get over the doubt and fear of to get to a place where you're actually being honest of how is this going, right? Now that's bisected too by this concept of finding a balance of the right type, kind, and depth of effort. And what that is predicated on is your skill and your knowledge. So that's like your previous training, right? Your specific strategy for that class, your plan. How much did you plan? What are some other aspects that we have to deal with? Is everybody really tired tonight?
What kind of energy you have to?
Oh, hang on. Sorry. I want to hear from different people tonight too, because some of you I feel like are not fully present with me. And so I'm giving you the feedback right now that this is not going to be a skate by tonight. Okay. So you can leave and watch this later if you're like, that would be better for me. But hang in there with me. I'd really love to have you guys like show up for this because it's going to make it better for everybody if we can be here together. Okay. So what is another aspect of this calculation of going into something and it coming out a certain way, right? We have a plan. Now we've got a strategy, we've got skill, and we've got the effort, the want, the desire to do it. We're getting over the imposter syndrome. What's the thing you can't control? The outcome, why? What happens when that's one way to say it. That's one way to say it. There you go. And what happens even right now, like what was I just commenting on? It was the group dynamic, right? Whenever you get people together, you're always going to have a group dynamic. And you may have people who are like your normal 9 a.m. Wednesday crew, like I have, and you start to cultivate a certain expectation around it. But even within that, you can't control, like if one week is like, oh my gosh, that wasn't 11, there's no way it's going to be 11 the next week, right? It's just not going to happen. So then that affects the strategy, right? The skills and knowledge inform the effort. So what you're learning here. And by the way, here's the big thing at week 8 or 9, kind of in the middle of that, as you twilight into the last 3 weeks. The skills and knowledge is laid for you. It's laid bare for you. It's all the tools are in your tool belt. Now it's about practicing them and being able to know when to pull this one out, when to cue the feet, when to talk about the breath, all these kinds of things. With the group dynamic, so you kind of like balance effort with skill set and knowledge. But the other aspect of this axiom is group dynamic with your strategy. And so just the same way you can choke a class, you can choke the energy with a class with too much effort. You can also choke a class with beholding too tightly to your strategy in class. So the last metric to really kind of, and these 5 things that I'm listing off are called what I would call feed forward. So we're starting with feed forward. So this is a bit of a dyslexic experience tonight. We're starting from the back. Okay. But so the effort, skills and knowledge, strategy, group dynamic, and then finally, how did it go? How did it go for me? Or how do I want it to go for me? And that can be different from the strategy, right? Because you should have some skin in the game for yourself and how you want it to go. Okay. Who feels like feedback is easy for you? Like, where in your life outside of yoga are you actively having conversations around growth and development that are honest, that are sometimes difficult? But yeah, in the military. Yeah, it's lovely. They love the feedback in the military. So we had a military person here once who talked about how to give feedback, and this is jumping ahead a little bit. The shit sandwich.
Whoa.
Do you know? Does everybody know what that is? Christina, would you just say what that is?
The shit sandwich is when you put shit in the middle. So you start with something good, and then you say all the things that they suck at. So then you finish up with something good that Mary.
Yeah. You're like, thanks for class. By the way, this, and this sucked. And I love the color blue. I love that color of blue right there. That's a great, that's, yeah, that sweater just really brings out your eyes. Okay. So ultimately understanding that like to put us into a position where we're getting over the hump of imposter syndrome and allowing ourselves to be vulnerable to receive feedback, we have to be enacting these 5 strategies of feed forward. We have to be engaged with this conversation ourselves through this and be like, how is it going, and really be able to be there. Then the next thing is to understand what feedback is for. It's a tool for learning, for growth, and when done well, it really shouldn't, we don't want it, especially here, to feel laborious. You know, teaching here is really unique. You get a lot of different types of opportunities you don't get at, like I have a friend, she did our teacher training 2 or 3 years ago, and she teaches at a gym, and it's tough for her because teachers don't come to her class. She doesn't have other teachers that she can really go to that are kind of speaking the same yogic language. You know what I mean? Like, you all went through this experience just like Erica did, but Erica is 4 years seasoned, 4.5 years seasoned into this same conversation that you're having, versus like her coming from maybe an Ashtanga world, right? 4.5 years down the road, where you kind of have to do this to kind of get some of the same understanding around what feedback might work between the two of you.
No, sorry, it clicked.
Other aspects of teaching at a gym, you know, is just that your students aren't generally there for the yoga part of it. They're like, oh, my chiropractor sent me here because my back is sore and I'm working that out. You know, it may sneak in for some of those people, but it's even, what I'm trying to say to you is it's even hard to get good feedback from your students here who are yoga students. Does that make sense? Okay. And stop anytime if you have anything to add or question. But the point is, feedback is a tool for growth, development, and when done really well, and hopefully we'll kind of set some parameters to help cultivate this to happen more often than not, because you can't always control it, especially when like it was a total shit show for you, like as a student, you're like, oh my God, that was a nightmare. And they come out and they're like, man, I crushed it, right? And you're like, okay. But when it's working well, when feedback is working well, it should feel enjoyable. It should feel like you're playing in the sandbox. Because what it ultimately does is it gives you, the person giving feedback, opportunity to learn too. And so this is an important thing. So if I come to Andrea's class, even my positioning, like they teach you this, is to like not face you. So what I tend to do is I like kind of stand shoulder to shoulder with the person. So it's not putting the issues that generally tend to come up in feedback between us. So we can put them here and look at them from the same perspective. And even if you can't do that physically, what you really want to use is language that will position the conversation in that way, to pivot that away from saying something like, Nathan says, how was class, Austin? And I say, well, you did this thing, right? That right there is a very pointed sentence. It starts off with like, you did this and it was bad. Versus how could we be more diplomatic, or like maybe what's another word for that, but softer. Yeah.
Like there's this one thing that kind of tripped me up a little bit, and I don't know if you did it or I don't know. I guess just the first part. Like there's this one part that tripped me up. Yeah.
There's something I noticed. That's good. That's getting there. I would say that's in the middle, but I still want you to get all the way over here to really create safety around the conversation. What's that, Liz?
I was gonna say, may I suggest, but that might be still.
That's probably still towards middling, towards pointy. So okay, let's qualify this real quick before you go, Christina. So I'm talking specifically now about subjective feedback. So objective is, I mean, there's not really any way to soften, you missed the left side, right?
I think we missed the left side.
I think we missed the left side, yeah.
He is better than I.
It seemed like, right, so there we go. Say, we missed the left side, or or did we, ask a leading question. The other aspect is the subjective. How do we shift it from being pointed? So say I thought that you held Warrior 2 too long. How would I say that wasn't, Carly, you held Warrior 2 too long, right? And okay, that's middle.
I was not a word too.
Uh-huh.
Liz, you got some?
No, I was just laughing at Christina, that was funny.
Nathan? Okay, I'm just going to give you an option. Tell me what you think of this. You could say something to them like, I felt like. That's really important, to start it with ownership around, I felt like Warrior 2 was held too long. Very different than, house class, you held Warrior 2 too long. Even, I felt like you held Warrior 2 too long. Do you see how just by taking literally one word, you, out of that, it diffuses some of the sharpness to it and can be like, I felt like, so you're owning it, that you're, first of all, a feeling is a subjective thing. So you're saying, this is just how I felt, so take it for what it is, kind of thing. And then rather than pointing blame, you're just saying the statement, plain and simple. Okay. So objective feedback is factual. It's valuable, but it's also rare from especially expertise. Because again, you're just not gonna have those kind of students. Whereas subjective is personal opinion, whereas every single person who comes out of your class is gonna have an opinion, right? Now, whether they share that with you or not is another thing. So that's why it really takes like in a way, it's a really big gift when somebody gives you feedback, when they take the time to sit down with you and be open and honest about being invested in your growth and development, because that's what it is. That's what it's a conversation about. That's why it's so easy to just walk away and say, oh, it was great. Because it gets slippy, right? Because it's about those opinions have to do with feelings. And if they're not an expert, well, what gives them the right anyway? But you would still want to know even from the non-expert. It's just you take that with a different grain of salt than, you know, if Laura comes to your class and gives you a piece of feedback, you really want to like write that down and try it on, as we say, right? So even if it's something that rubs up against your better instinct and you're like, ooh, I don't know about that. That doesn't really feel like my style. If somebody who's got 20 years, 10 years, who you respect, you like their class, tells you something, what's the harm in trying something on, right?
Usually, if you're giving good feedback, it's like the way I've been taught is like if you're gonna present the problem, also present it with a solution. You can,
Mm-hmm.
not just, yeah, we did this, and this wrong. Thanks. Bye.
Yeah.
But like, oh, I noticed X, Y, and Z, maybe we could try.
Yeah, like with the playlist, right? Like, oh, that, I love that Tom Petty song. However, I think that would work a lot better towards like the second half of class because it's got a lot of words and it's a slower beat. So it wasn't really clicking into Sun B for me, right? It wasn't clicking into Sun B. Not you, your song didn't click in, right? It wasn't clicking for me. All right. Okay, so let's talk about receiving feedback. Let's go back to this question. Where are you open to receive feedback in your life outside of teaching? Where are you practicing feedback in terms of saying, give me feedback in your life?
I'm giving a lot right now. On my
Yeah.
research
Oh,
project.
yeah.
Yeah, you are.
So, and it's good.
Does it feel good?
It does, because.
Was
I
it
know-
always that way though?
No,
What made the change?
I think as soon as I started applying some of that and saying, oh yeah, this really does make it flow better. I needed to cover this more. And now it's all coming together. I'm like, wow, this is really actually very good. And it's because I had
Yes.
all these people telling me, like, this is where you can improve, this is where you're
Yeah.
strong.
And that's a hard thing to learn when you're a beginner with yoga because we get super precious about it sometimes, or like music or whatever you may create, you get precious and you don't want to, as they say, kill your darlings. Are you familiar with that, right? Right? So what does that mean? Does anybody know what?
So
Yeah.
you don't want to- Doesn't it relate back to your kids? Or am I thinking of this wrong?
Oh, it could be.
Okay, no, you tell me.
It just means the things about like a, say like a song, right? And it's like maybe that was the lyric that like got the whole song started, but it doesn't really fit now that the song's finished. But the way you see it, you're like, but that's a pivotal lyric. Like that's the whole song was written around that. And people coming at it from the outside, they're like, well, that lyric doesn't even really work anymore in that song. And so being too precious about it, you know, that's where that saying comes from, is make sure you kill your darlings. And so, yeah, that's beautiful. The more you ask for feedback, the easier it gets and the better you get. And then the feedback becomes less of an affront. And you can see when people kind of get into that fight or flight state and get locked down a little bit around things. And sometimes it's not always the right time too. Like if I start giving somebody feedback and I kind of see their body language shrivel and their eyes go down and they start sobbing uncontrollably, that might be time to just button it up. Just button it up. You laughing? Did I? I've never made you cry from feedback, have I? Okay. It's a subtle art to give feedback, but so first step for seeking feedback, give your students an opening. So when you end class, you have to like run after them. You have to chase them down because they're not going to stand around and be like, hey, Christina, thanks for class. I can't wait to tell you how I thought about it, right? They may just say that was great, but how can I get more information if they offer that up? So I'm leaving your class, Haley. You're like, maybe you don't even ask. Maybe you don't say anything to me. And I'm just like, thanks for class. It was great.
Oh, you want me to respond?
Mhm.
Oh, okay. I would not say that. I would
So let's
say-
paint the picture.
Okay.
Okay. So you just taught a class and it was total shit.
Oh.
You forgot the left side. Your playlist was messed up. A bird flew into the window. All the things that could have gone wrong went wrong.
Okay.
I walk out of your class. Before you even say anything, I just say, that was a great class.
I feel like, are you lying? I feel like
Okay.
I don't know. what
Two.
to say.
So you did one thing really well. One thing we can work on a little bit.
Okay.
So what you never ever say to a student is that was total shit. Right?
Yeah,
Even if
I
you,
figured, I was like, I
even
think I
if- yeah.
should say
yes, even if you know you just taught the worst class, why do you not say that?
They might not even notice.
Yeah. And they, and by the way, what if it was not even about noticing? What if they had a really great experience?
Yeah.
What if they really had a genuinely great class and then you go, the teacher goes, no, it was bad. Then you minimize, you reduce their experience and their truth of it. So again, that is about asteya. Do you remember what asteya is? What's asteya? That's satya. Close. I know they sound a lot alike. Hey, we need these yamas and niyamas tight, you guys. I'm serious. What's going on? What are you studying? I'm here to challenge you. Do you want to just coast through these last 3 weeks? Let's double down on this. What's the first yama? Ahimsa. What's it mean? Non-violence. What's the second one? Satya. What's it mean? Spit it. It's truthfulness. What's the third one? No. Oh my gosh. Y'all need to know that this should be back of the hand. This should be back of the hand stuff. I'm sorry to come down on you this hard tonight, but this is some feedback. The yamas and niyamas are the most important thing that you can be doing at this point. Why? Because you're nowhere near being masters of asana, pranayama, any of the other 8 limbs. And so what qualifies you to get over the hump of imposter syndrome? Your ability to be kind, to be truthful, to be a role model. In effect, when you hold space for your students, that's what you're doing. You're role modeling and embodying the precepts of moral and ethical behavior of yoga philosophy. And that means you can teach crow even if you can't do crow. Who gives a crap if you can't touch your toes? Do you know your yamas and niyamas? That's what matters. Okay? So by 3 weeks from now, I need you to be rolling those off the tongue. Ahimsa. Satya, which is what? Truthfulness. Brahmacharya. What is brahmacharya? Sure, we'll call it moderation. That one's a little, not so much. I don't look at it like that, but I think in a Vedic, you would, in Tantric, it would be more moderation. Yeah, but you get it. You get it. It means a follower of Brahma is what it really means. It means the student of life who's willing to say, I mean, that's what we're talking about. This ability to be strong enough to put yourself in that extremely vulnerable spot of feedback is brahmacharya. That's an active, so it's not necessarily moderation, but it is control. It's moderating the power. It's moderating the energy in a specific way where you become a follower of the teacher, right? You become the student. That's what brahmacharya is. What's next? Asteya, which brings us full circle. So if you say that was a shitty class, that's steya. And what we want to be practicing is asteya. Remember, the A negates the word. Steya is what? Stealing. Thank you, Carly. So you're stealing. It's okay. As long as you're learning them. I don't care about how you learn it, y'all. I just want you to learn it, you know?
I've been writing them on my mirror in my bathroom. Like, I'll write, I need to write it here, but I've been like
Beautiful.
writing.
Okay, so here's a challenge for all of you. I want you all to get a piece of paper, whether it's a note card or a card or whatever, something small that you can put in your car. And what I want you to do is write down your favorite yama on one side. On the other side, I want you to write down your favorite niyama. And you're going to put it in your car, and every day you'll just flip it over. So every day you're practicing the yama, and then the next day you're practicing the yama. And stick with those two for the next 3 weeks. No other ones. That's all you need is those two. Okay? You've been charged. Will you follow through? Okay. Well, let's finish this off real quick. What's next? Somebody already said it. Aparigraha, which is non-grasping, right? So this is the whole concept. We talked about this over meditation training a lot of detachment, not being attached to what specifically. Doesn't mean you don't care. Doesn't mean the effort's not there. What does it mean? Say it louder for the people in the back. Unattached from the outcome, right? Remember? Yeah. Okay, let's get into our niyamas. What's the first one? What is Saucha? Purity of what? Yes, thoughts, words, actions. Thoughts, words, and actions. So this is not just cleaning your room up. This is not just messy bed, messy head. Make sure you make your bed when you leave. This works in conjunction with Satya and Ahimsa deeply, right? Because if you're not truthful about harmful thoughts, you're not practicing Saucha. You're having negative thoughts, if you're holding on to resentment, to bitterness, doesn't mean you won't do that, but it means you are building the capacity to call yourself out on this so that you do it less and less. And that's what the yamas and niyamas are their practices, not to attain perfection in, but to attain expansion and growth. They're tools to develop, just like feedback, right? What's the second one?
Santosha.
Yes, and this is exactly to what I was just saying, right? Not about perfection. It's about contentment, which is something that you do actually earn, right? Contentment is a result of giving it the maximum amount of effort, moving into situations with clarity, with kindness, with compassion, and then you can feel content that you did your best. You're still unattached, still a parigraha from the results, but you know that you did your part, right? To meet the universe halfway, or God, or whatever. Third one is tapas. What's tapas? Say that. Discipline. I like that one the best. So discipline, this one can be translated just like brahmacharya a lot of different ways, and people use it a lot of different ways. I think the big umbrella concept of tapas is, when you are at that moment of your practice where you feel the fire ignite because you worked hard, that is tapas. Tapas means heat. But what it really refers to is building that internal heat, working towards that inflection point, getting past your own resistance, doing the hard thing. So then all of a sudden the universe, the conspiracy of the universe that is in your favor, you catch the wind in your sail of that, right? That moment where the spark catches the wood, it lights a fire. That's tapas. But it takes discipline, because if you're not the one getting yourself up onto the mat every day, practicing these yamas and niyamas, you're never gonna catch fire, right? Next. Svadhyaya. Say it with me. Svadhyaya. Get these in your mouth. Svadhyaya. Yeah, get them in your mouth. Ahimsa. Satya.
Satya.
Brahmacharya.
Brahmacharya.
Asteya.
Asteya.
Aparigraha.
Aparigraha.
Saucha.
Saucha.
Santosha.
Santosha.
Tapas.
Tapas. Svadhyaya.
Svadhyaya. Svadhyaya is what? So this is where it gets a little deeper. Okay. Svadhyaya is, yes, self-inquiry. So some people say self-study, but what it really is asking is, what is my dharma in life? What is my purpose? And it doesn't mean, how can I make a lot of money? What do my parents want me to do? Who should I marry? How many kids should I have? This is, when I'm at my best, how am I functioning in the world? How can I serve? What do I have to offer? How can I change the world? So when I leave this place someday, which we all do, how can I make it better? That is the purpose of the self-inquiry, is not to obviously big questions go into this, like, where do I come from? What am I doing here? Where am I going? But really the only thing that matters in that equation, the other two can help, the past and future can help, but really where we need to focus Svadhyaya is understanding a framework of what we are doing here with this limited amount of precious resource and energy. And the other side of the coin of this Svadhyaya, which refers to study. So yes, we study the self in this very specific way, but we're also studying the Shastras. We're also studying authoritative text or scripture. This is very important. So we're always reaching into that which has been left behind, that has been deemed truth by other people. Does that make sense? This can show up in the Torah. This can show up in the Bible. It doesn't have to be just yoga. It can be Buddhist texts, Taoist texts, on and on and on. But you're reading and marinating the mind in truths greater than your ability to decipher them from your present position. Does that make sense? So on one hand, the self-inquiry is the question, what the hell am I doing here? And at the other hand, you're always balancing that against people have figured out the question for themselves and understanding what does it look like for other people on the other side of this. So that starts to inform the journey for you. Okay, so that's what Svadhyaya is. And then the last one. Say it loud. You said well. Yeah, let's all say Ishvara Pranidhana. Yeah, and this is bowing to that which is greater than us. And not only greater than us, but the greatness of us, in us, of us, and beyond us. So in us, of us, and beyond us. And, you know, this is kind of the magic bullet. You can totally be a complete flunky on all other 9 yamas and niyamas. But if you get this one really well, this is where the potency of yoga really catches traction, is when you become devoted and you recognize the divine in other people, you recognize the divine in yourself, and not even recognize it, but because sometimes it's hard to recognize, but you understand that it's there, you believe it's there, you have faith it's there, a faith that's tested, and you surrender to it. You surrender to it in a way that shows reverence, that shows honor, shows respect, shows devotion. That's the big component here of yoga. That it's not a religious practice. Yoga is a religious, meaning you can't graft it onto your own religion. If you have a pre-existing religion, you graft it right there. But this is the kind of kernel of this a-religious philosophy, the science of the mind. It's also a psychology, right? It's a philosophy and psychology and a practice. So it's kind of this beautiful trifecta. But the heart of that is really about devotion. Because how do you answer for ahimsa? You can't be, but you can be devoted to it. How do you answer for discipline? You have to devote yourself to it. How do you answer to be the student, to follow Brahma, to find your Dharma? How do you answer to not ever really being sure that you know why you're here, right? Through that self-inquiry. You just continually humble yourself. Yeah, it's tough. Okay. This is important though. And there's a piece of this that I want to talk about. Because how do the yamas affect feedback? We want to be kind. We want to be truthful, right? We don't want to steal on either side of it. Brahmacharya too is a great way to dictate. So like, I remember there's a period of time when I was teaching where I would go to a younger teacher's class and I would just start to like have a list of like 30 things that I was going to tell them. How would you handle 30 things if I came out of class and told you 30 things, right? So this is important. 3 things. This is all you need to ever talk about after a class with a teacher. When you're giving, now, when you graduate, you will be given qualified feedback. You are no longer on this end of the Dunning-Kruger spectrum. You now have some expertise in 3 weeks. So that is all the more reason it's important that you are limiting to the three things. And what are they? Well, they're obviously the most important things, right? Okay, I'm all worked up. I'm sweaty. I'm excited. Sweaty, bubbly, sweaty, bubbly, burpy, gassy, bloaty.
May I ask a question?
Yes.
So, what about nonverbal feedback? I'm thinking in the realm of that, I would like to have some kind of private practice, and say people don't come back, then that non-verbally they're telling you something happened. Like, how do you address that?
Okay. I'm so glad you said, you're like a perfect plant because you just threaded into the next little bullet on my outline. Okay. So, and I hope this addresses this for you the way that I think it will. Okay. So this is the consideration bias. Okay. So whenever we put ourselves out into the world to do something, the consideration bias tells us that 30% of the people are going to love what we do. 30% of the people generally are going to not love what we do. And 30% of the people aren't going to give 2 bits. Right? So when I have a class of 9 people, 3 people are going to love it. 3 people are going to be in the middle, not necessarily indifferent, but they may not know if they love it or don't love it. Right? And then the people who are certain that they don't like it. So we can tell ourselves all sorts of stories if people don't come back to class, like, oh, they must have been in that lower quadrant and hated it. But who knows, they may have moved and never told us, or maybe they went through some life change. So this helps kind of keep our expectations around what stories we tell ourselves right-sized. And furthermore, it also gives us a focal point. So the people who love what you're doing, it's probably pretty easy for us to recognize what we're doing to get their approval, right? The people who don't love what you're doing, well, I hate to say it, you're probably not going to be able to turn them around. So the ones you want to focus on are the ones smack dab in the middle. The ones who aren't overzealous about how great your class was, or the people who won't make eye contact with you on the way out the door, right? Oh, there's just wiggle room. There's just wiggle room. Yeah. So it could be 30 to 33.3. It could be, you know what I mean? But it's roughly about a third of the class is going to love it. A third is going to be, and those are the people that, by the way, how do you win them over? You strike up the conversation of what worked for them. And by the way, it may have worked and they may have liked it better than they think they do. And that is why feedback, the conversation of feedback is so valuable. Because if a student, back to your thing about Astea, student walks out and says, it was great, because we never finished this. I got all fired up by the yums and yums. Astea, right? We don't want to say, oh, that class was shit, but also the thing that we can improve upon in that little mock-up we did was when they say great, we can say, rather than, do you have any feedback for me? Because that all instantly gets them into an unqualified position. We're presenting jargonish language that takes them outside of the scope of the conversation. So what we can say is simply, what did you love about it? Or what did you think was great? Or was there anything specifically you did like? Or, hey, you know, I was really working on creating, this is the peak pose. What did you think of that? Did you feel that? Did we get there? You know, so you can ask more pointed, directed questions in a way that actually up levels their expertise and moves them on the scale of the Dunning-Kruger just by giving them a little bit of an informative question. Do you have a question? Is that just a finger out? Okay. Okay. So that middle percent, that middle group of people who might be kind of unsure about it, the conversation, if they really liked it, but aren't even, you know, sometimes you come out of class and you're just like, I don't even know what happened. I'm so new to yoga, I don't even know what happened. So giving them a moment to process it with you will make them realize, oh, I really actually did love that. And then they're more likely to come back. Or if there was any kind of snag for them, you can then say, ooh, yeah, you're right. We did forget the left side. Thank you so much for saying that. And then all of a sudden they're in on the jig with you. Do you know what I'm saying? Now they're conspired with you around trying to be a better teacher. And so all of a sudden, by asking the right questions, using informative language that's not exclusive and inclusive instead, you've created a somebody on your side. You've created a constituency with them, right? And then they get invested in your teaching, and then they're more likely to come back the next week. All right. So we talked about feed forward, and a component of that was the strategy, right? Now we're going to break the strategy down with something I call the PEP. Okay. And this is kind of something I got from the military because they do the after action reports. Have you heard? Do you guys know what these are? AARs? Okay. Yeah. So anyway, I stole this and changed the acronym. And this is instead of an after action report, this is called a PEP. It's a pre-event preparation plan. Hey, it's peppy. It keeps it peppy. So what do you want to get across? What goals do you have? What's your theme? What are in your queuing are you working on? And so this is a great place to start to look at that teacher metric and say, okay, so I've got these metrics. I've got sequence execution. I've got rhythm and timing. I've got language, body language, and just kind of like demos. And we used to call this also the adjusting, but since we're not doing adjusting yet, it gets kind of body language light. Then voice, which is different from language, right? Do we all understand how voice is different than language? Because voice is really how I'm using it to talk over them, but also trying not to get loud and make you feel like I'm being aggressive with you and yell at you. I mean, like, that's what I said, it was voice. You know what I mean? Like, getting mad about it. So all that modulation, you know, your nervous system is so sensitive to your yoga teacher because you're in a heightened state of sensitivity and vulnerability. And really, you know, I love, somebody said this once upon them. I wish I could remember who it was to give them credit, but they said, when you go to a yoga teacher, what you're basically consenting and consigning to is allowing them to place their nervous system on your nervous system to help create an experience for your nervous system through their own. So when we talk about holding space, it's not just this kind of like practical, clinical aspect of like being, you know, the apt teacher, but it's also about like, what were the choices you made the night before? How well are you practicing the yamas and yamas? Are you calling yourself out on your own bullshit? Are you staying up too late when you know you got a class to teach in the morning and you really should be putting in the time to sleep for your students, right? These things come through in unspoken ways, in ways that people understand them even when they're unspoken, right? When you're showing up as your best self, you read the facial expressions in 1,000 bits per minute way faster than even the voice gives away. But the voice gives it away too, right? The voice will betray you. If you're trying to hide something, you have to be really putting a lot of energy into fooling people with this and with the voice, unless they're confirmed in their bias around you and want to believe your BS, right? But again, that's only going to be 30% of your students. So your class numbers are going to dwindle because now you've got 2/3 of your class every time that's calling you on your bullshit that you're not willing to call yourself on. That's not coming back. Okay. So these are the metrics. Sequence execution. Was it accurate? Was it safe? Rhythm and timing. Did you start on time? Did you finish on time? Did you hold the sides appropriately? Did you find a natural rhythm to class and hit the peak right when you felt like the student's energy peak was there? Language is this is the biggest thing. So a lot of times we think voice is the biggest thing. Voice is huge because, again, the voice is the instrument to which we project our nervous system on the student's nervous system and kind of give them a projected experience of whatever we're bringing to the experience, whether we're conscious of it, unconscious of it, or intentional or unintentional. But the language is not just your filler words, the stuff you want to cut out, but how you're carving your way through creating authenticity in the cues that you're using. Because you guys all have this baseline in your manual of what cues, you know, we say, all right, lay the foot this way, put the arm this way. But I hope that you're getting familiar with them now to the point where you're making them your own. And that's what we want. We want to encourage you to get to that point where you're not just regurgitating the script, right? The script is great to get you to a place where you are scaffolding confidence for yourself to then what? To rest on your laurels? No, you scaffold that confidence. So then you go out on the limb and take risks and use words like, you know, I don't know, there's just so many great adjectives. We did this exercise in my teacher training where we took the alphabet and we wrote for each letter an adjective. And then you use that in your cue. So instead of just like lift your leg to the sky, you could say,
Elevate.
elevate, thank you. There was one. Float. Yes, dance your leg to the sky. You know, obviously you don't want to get distracting with it, but you start to learn what speaks for you in a authentic, but also in a poetic way. because that is really what the language is for. And the cues then, it's the dance of asana. That is the poetry of yoga, right? And it's not just the way that I'm putting my arm into time and space. Like if you say like lift your left arm, right? I lift my left arm. But then if you change it from simply a directive cue and start using either an operative cue to now, how am I feeling my arm lift? And you put that adjective and insert it there, lift your arm in a sturdy way. You lift your arm and elongate through the fingertips, right? Now you're creating operative cues, which is where we want you to start to get to towards the end of this. So everything you've learned up to this point, about 90% of the cues you've learned are all directive, right? Put your heel on the ground, lift your arm, put your tailbone down, pull your chin back, right? It's about moving the body into a position. But the operative is now teaching you how to feel into those, how to sensate. And that's something that when you're putting yourself out on that limb, your students will then, even if you're taking risks that don't always pay off, your students will recognize your vulnerability and they'll say, oh, it's safe to make mistakes here. It's safe to try things out. It's safe. We're in the playground. All of a sudden now we're in the sandbox and they're allowing themselves to actually feel the length in my arm. You know what I mean? Like that seems insane, but actually, you know what? Maybe there's something to that. And then in 300 hour, we get into integrative cueing, which is a whole different thing. But really, through 200 hour, you should master directive cues and you should start to really get your toes dipped into operative cues, right? And this is all new, this is all review, right? We remember the cueing methodology, okay? Voice, and then finally, the big thing is connection, right? So this is the other teaching metric, which is how do you get your special sauce across, right? So like to me, tonight, I really wanted to make this special for you all. I wanted to make it special for me too. Like that's what I want for you. That's what I want for me. And I felt like we weren't quite, like you're tired. I get that. It's week 9. This weather is shit, right? But we found a way. Now we're all of a sudden like, are you guys feeling a little bit more fiery about this stuff? Like, yeah, feedback. Let's do this, right? Okay, so let's do this. That is your pep. And also, obviously, you can't have a good pep without a purr, which is the post-event reflection response, right? So this is about that feed forward that I was talking about earlier. So the pep is all, how do you prepare for class in terms of what are you focusing on, specifically in a way that you can engage even the complete neophyte in a conversation about legitimate, subjective or objective feedback for your own usage, and to bring them into, again, consignment around your own growth and development, making sure that they come back. But the purr is, well, we already went over the 5, right? It's effort, skill, strategy, group dynamic, and how did it go for you? It's also really important, I would say, to start with. So these are small steps. What we're talking about right now is class to class, which is really where the freaking sweet juice is. This is where I want you to be working. This is what you're breathing, eating, getting up in the morning for, right? This is breakfast, lunch, and dinner. But I don't want you to not have one eye also on long-term goals in your teaching. So I really, if you're going to be teaching here, I want you to be growing and developing yourself. And that comes down to you and you alone. That's why our teachers are so good here, because it is encouraged in the culture of feedback here that part of the conversation is, what are you doing next? What is your 3-month goal? How are you filling your cup up with this continuing ed? How's your practice going? How are you filling up your current cup? And also, where do you want your teaching to be in 6 months, 3 months, 9 months, a year? So just kind of having a rough handle on those kinds of things, which it sounds like some of you thinking about the internship, thinking about the yin training, thinking about the 300 hour, even if you're not doing all of them, the fact that you've thought about those, great. I love that. Okay. That's not news. Like I would hate to come in tonight and be like, who's doing the yin training? You're all, I hadn't thought about it. Okay. So the last thing before we break into small groups and do a little exercise is just a quick question. What is the difference between compassion and empathy?
I guess empathy is like putting yourself in their shoes, where it's more actions.
Say that again. An act. Yeah. Nathan?
Empathy is like an ability. You have to actually picture yourself in their situation.
Okay.
You have to understand it from other
So let's define also sympathy then, right?
words.
Because I can, and you're exactly right. So sympathy means like you just got your toe ran over in the parking lot by a car, right? And I can be like, oh, that sucks for you. That's sympathy versus, oh my gosh, like I feel a little bit of your pain. That is empathy versus, holy crap, let me call the doctor. That's compassion. That's taking action on it, right? So why do I bring this up in terms of feedback? Why does that matter?
If you're gonna give somebody feedback, I feel like you should think about how you would take that feedback, like the wording of it.
Ooh, that's a good, there's no wrong answer here, except for wrong answers, but that's a good answer. There's many right answers is what I mean to say. Yes. So think about, yeah, think about how that hits you. What else?
Empathizing with a teacher's what they're feeling, and it helps you to intuitively then guide your feedback to them specifically.
Boom, money. So if you start giving a teacher feedback and all of a sudden you've touched on something where they're shutting down, if you are open to empathy, you will feel that. And then that will now hopefully dictate an action of compassion to where you'll either say, I'm sorry, did I like hurt your feelings, or should we talk about this again another time or take a break from this, right? So that empathy informs the compassion. They're not, that's what makes it tricky. They're not completely separate, but just understand that compassion is the end result of what you do with the way that you're being informed around what you're either imagining or able to feel the other person state is in. But how does empathy and compassion, how does it relate to you as somebody receiving feedback? Okay, hold that thought. So what if they come out of class and they're low on the Dunning-Kruger? And they're like, you go, how was class? They're like, I didn't like it. Right? How does empathy and compassion happen there? You can be like, well, F you, get the hell out of here. Right?
I mean,
Well, remember, it's a process. You go through empathy, then compassion. So the action should be informed by the mutual understanding of what emotions are at play.
feeling like, okay, you know, I've done this class before, maybe it wasn't my favorite, so I've been there before. Maybe what can I do differently?
There you go. So it can inform this thing. If they're low on the Dunning-Kruger, first of all, if they said that, we know that already. If somebody's feedback is I don't like it, that is so reductive around anything that is progressive or developmental for somebody. So that means not only do they probably not know anything about yoga, but they probably have a lot of self-awareness to work on, a lot of self-maturity, a lot of self-actualization to work on. So now we can kind of look at them a little bit differently and say, ooh, that hurt. But I understand that's coming from a person who they probably didn't mean that. And they're probably in a place where they're not very sensitized themselves. So they may be a little numb to those things. They may not have meant that. And especially if they're just like firing off the hip. No, wasn't that great, right? So then that's the empathy. That's the understanding into, okay, this is the emotional positioning. And then the action is like what you said, which was beautiful, which is, oh, what did you not like about it? Or what could I have done differently, right? Yeah, rather than taking it. The point is, very easy to take personal when we are not strong enough to be in that vulnerable space to allow empathy to be the transactional current, right? Liz, you were going to say something too. Did you remember? I hope.
Well, it was just kind of pretty much
piggybacking off of that, like just like if someone in like the class, like being empathetic towards the concept that like kind of like you said, like they're going through their own thing, like they're experiencing the class like through different like lenses of their awareness. And like but then I can be compassionate to understand that like maybe it just didn't fit, like the vibe wasn't right for this.
You're like, I think we need to see other yoga people. It's not me, it's you. Wait, it's not you, it's me. I don't know. It's something. Okay, so let me flip it. So what if somebody comes out of your class and they're like, oh my God, that was the best class I've ever had. Do you go, sweet, I'm done?
Yeah. I guess that it would be just like being, I don't know, like, because maybe they're.
Let me ask you this. Is that what we want in the context of what feedback is for?
No, because we want to be able to grow, like we want that wiggle room, like we don't want to plateau.
Okay, that was easy for you to realize in this imaginary situation. But what I really want this to land for you deep in your genetics, in your DNA, in your cells, that when we put ourselves out there in ways such as teaching yoga, we are not looking to get a pat on the back at the end of the day. We're not looking, we don't necessarily, we want, yes, we do want to serve our students. We want our strategy to work. We want to bring maximal effort, whatever that might be. You might be a total shit show that day. So maximal effort might be 10%, but if you can give 100% of that 10%, okay, right? But really what we want to be doing is learning every time we teach, because it is the most fertile opportunity for us to grow and develop as a teacher. Again, CEUs give you new tools. Practicing yoga sharpens those tools, but it's how we learn to use the tools that is everything. And that happens when we are in a healthy, active conversation around feedback. And so what we're doing when we show up to teach is we're there to just broaden the conversation around what works, what could be better. Because let's face it, I'll see you next week, and let's work to get better.
So I think like adding to one of the conversations we were having, like how did you like class, oh, what did you like the best about it? Like I think an even better question is to ask a very pointed question. So for like example, I was and afterwards she asked one of the students like, oh, how'd you like it? And he was like, oh, it was good. And she asked, could you hear me okay? And that like that's a very specific feedback question, because that's something that they can think about and be like, oh yeah, no, I could hear you, or oh no, you did need to be a little bit louder.
Yes. And that goes to those 5 things I listed off of what are you working on? Are you working on the cueing? You're working on your voice, your language. So those are ways in which you've got those locked and loaded. So when you get the neophyte coming out, you go to them, you know, today I was working on the sequence. So that's what I'm going to ask people about, right?
Does it make them not feel bad if they have like, negative feedback?
Or if they don't know either.
Or if they don't know.
Yeah, and a lot of them won't know. So
You can
let's
specifically ask.
let's put this into practice. I want you to break into your groups that you did the music with. And this is going to be quick. It's going to be really quick, but you're going to give them 3 main points of feedback, okay? And you're going to give, here's the 3 things. You're going to give them one thing that you thought was strong and positive and it worked in the feedback. One thing that you think needs to improve, and use an actionable suggestion, right? So again, like Christina said earlier, don't just come to don't come to them with problems, come to me with solutions, baby. You know what I mean? And then the third thing is another, maybe I list this one as just another consideration. So this can be an abstract thing. It can be more practical. It's really just allows you to kind of have a wild card third point. And it may be very obvious what that is going to be for you, but it could be something as like, you know, I noticed you used bonobo 3 times. Have you ever heard of this artist and this artist? They're a lot like bonobo, and that way you could try, right? try to vary it a little bit, or get different variety going on. Okay, so remember, let the feedback, each one of these points of feedback should be specific. And this is all here, by the way, if you want to look at this, it's in your handout. Should be specific, not general. And then end it with thanking them for their efforts. Don't be scared to ask questions again. Like, so I noticed you put an Elton John song in the very beginning. Why? Why would you do that? And okay, we're going to talk about receiving feedback when we come back. So don't even read the second half of the sheet. Don't worry about that so much. What this is an exercise in is you giving feedback, and then the receiver, you just listen. And I want to talk about how that felt when we come back. So it's going to be quick, about 3 minutes per side. So if you two are together, you have 3 minutes and then you have 3 minutes. Okay. And does everybody know who their partner was? Does everybody have a partner?
What if our partner is in a different?
They
room?
just said, Katie asked, would it be best if we called our partners / groups?
Do you have their number, Katie?
Mhm. Yeah, Katie's mine.
So yeah, Katie, why don't you call Andrea? And then Erin, who are you with? Do you have her number?
I do.
Will you call?
Yeah.
And then Sam, you don't have a partner for this probably, right? So can I just get a volunteer of a group for her to sit in?
We have a group of 3.
You have a group of 3. So Sam will sit in on that one. And Sam, I'm sorry. You feel free to add in where you want to, but listen in and take notes. Okay. I think this will still be valuable for you to just at least listen and sit in. Okay. So this should take no more than 10 minutes from soup to nuts. Okay. So 8:25, I want Tokuses back in the seats because we got a lot to come, or 7:25. We have a lot to cover in the last 30 minutes. You want to borrow? Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you.
No, we're not.
Hi. Hi.
How's it going?
Pretty good. I'm just this creepy person listening to you guys.
Yes.
Sarah.
Ah. Okay. All right, let's go. Oh, yeah.
Hey Carly or Christina, do you have Sarah June's number?
Yeah. Call her up. Put her on speaker.
We can't do it because then strike out a house.
Yeah, maybe. Unless they're gonna be, well, they might be.
I don't know.
I
Whatever.
know.
Let's just do
I'm
it.
screwing out. Okay, let's just do it. Okay, so
Okay,
if you
so-
want to give to both of us, and
Yeah.
then I can give to you too, and then you can give to us.
Wait,
Does that work? Yeah, right?
Wait, sorry, what?
Because we're giving feedback on the playlist, so.
Yeah.
Do you want to, and then she can start, and then I'll go, and then you go.
Okay, sounds
Okay,
good.
that work? Okay,
Yeah.
yeah, okay, cool. Okay, so first thing, I'm gonna take notes.
Oh, yeah.
And what I can do. That's a good idea. Okay, first thing for strong, positive. God, I'm not good at like specific, so I gotta be better at that, but, oh my goodness, I need a good adjective. You said ethereal, didn't you?
Yes.
So what's another one for that? Because I felt like that too.
Yeah, so I feel like
What's another
your
word for that?
playlist was so it was almost like, I don't know, like a symphony, like no lyrics, no, it wasn't telling you how to feel. And I liked that. Like it was just like your experiences here, this is like this like melodic, like
Melodic. Yeah.
just like sounds to go with your experience.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I love that about your playlist.
Very nice.
Thank you.
Yeah. And it was very good vibes.
Yeah.
Like it wasn't, no, I didn't get sad. Good.
Yeah, it was just like,
Yeah.
good.
Gosh, okay, great. I don't know what to put for improve though.
Improve. So with that same
What would you
token,
say?
I would say
There needs to
there
be
could
something a
be
little
one
bit.
like motivating song at the beginning. where it's
Okay.
Like,
Yeah.
I can relate to this. Let me get in my mode. Let me get motivated. I'm gonna work my
Yeah.
body. I'm gonna challenge myself.
Something that's a
With
little
that
more
same
like
token.
pumped up.
Yeah, just
Yeah,
in the
yeah,
beginning,
okay.
you know, or I don't know, maybe
I thought about the
70.
second song for a while and I was like, I feel like this maybe isn't amping students up too much. You know what I mean? Like the second one
Okay.
after the integration. So that's good to know.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's good.
Okay.
Okay,
Nice.
what about the wild card thing? I don't know what to do
It's
for that.
extra consideration. I don't know. I think that, I guess maybe opening your, like, I guess that would go along with continuing your education, like opening yourself up to what would resonate with yoga. Because I want to do the same for myself. So like, how am I gonna, you know, I don't know, with meditative music, tying that in with, you know, something that is also relatable to just anybody that
Oh
could
yeah,
walk in the street.
relatable.
Yeah,
That's good. That's a good
relatable
word.
while also helping with the experience.
Okay.
Just
Yeah.
continuing the education behind how music can facilitate the best experience for yoga.
That's good.
Can you
Yeah.
hear us, by the way?
Oh yeah.
you hear
I
us?
just realized that.
You can.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, great.
Okay.
Okay.
Just yell at us.
Okay, good. Okay, thank you.
We
Yeah,
like piggyback
We did
on
it
each
together,
other.
but I think that's
Okay,
fine,
we
right?
can just do, I guess we can just do that.
Save time too.
That works, yeah. Okay, good.
Okay, who wants their feedback next?
I don't care. I looked at you. I was like, I don't care.
Okay.
No, it's just.
Okay, I have Kim first on, I think, so you wanna do Kim?
Let's do Kim.
Yeah, let's do, okay.
Okay, so Kim for a strength for your playlist, I love the body of it. I felt like it had a really nice flow. I felt that I didn't have to think about it.
Yeah.
Yeah, kind of like what you said about parts in my playlist as well. I felt like I could just turn inward and connect with myself, and the playlist wasn't telling me how I should feel. It was really nice. Also, your like last, I think it was the last Sun B song is your core song, were amazing.
Oh, yeah.
I
What was it?
loved the feeling. I just felt so energized, and then it like it peaked really well, I thought, and then it started to come down nicely.
Yeah.
Like toward like when you get into like the crescent lunges and things. I just thought that was my favorite part of your playlist.
Yay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, so I thought you should continue that type of flow
All
there,
right.
and that body of it, I really liked. Yeah,
Okay.
It was very pretty music.
Oh, okay.
it was pretty.
And I don't think I had heard any of them. Yeah.
Oh.
I don't think I had.
So I tied in Yanni in the beginning and the end because I grew up listening to his
Okay.
music because
Yeah.
my mom really likes it.
Mhm.
And for me, always hearing it was a very like spiritual experience.
Yeah.
And it would always like sometimes bring tears to my eyes. And so I felt like it'd be very reverent to begin and end with.
That's so nice.
That was my intention. But like I also wanted to put in music that would be relatable and
Yeah.
motivating.
Positive.
Okay. And then as far as improvements, I felt like I was having a hard time settling down at the end a little bit.
Yeah.
I think it was the second to last song before Shavasana.
Yeah.
Was very upbeat.
Okay.
I thought to find like maybe less beats per minute there
Okay.
to help relax into that Shavasana, might give that a little bit more of a flow
Okay.
to it.
Sure.
Just getting settled in, you know,
Yes.
before you just lay
And I
there.
actually kind of did think that I was struggling.
Yeah,
with
I
it.
know.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's hard.
And I think I said this in the group chat too. I took out a song.
Yeah.
So maybe I should put
yeah,
it
you
back
did.
in.
Yeah, you said that. Yeah.
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 Because I was like, because that end song is so long,
Mhm.
but it's
That's so
playlist
hard.
is only 58 minutes. So,
Right.
and it can go like a little bit past an hour.
Yeah.
I think it's okay.
That meditative song I added at the end was like totally an optional one, but if I took that out, my playlist would only be like 58 minutes.
Yeah.
too,
Yeah.
So
Okay. Alright. Well,
Yes.
cool.
Good. Okay, do you want to give me mine?
Yes.
I'm nervous. Like, I already know what you guys are gonna say, so.
No, what?
No, because I think
You
way
want
too
yours?
many lyrical,
No.
but I will. It's because I'm like, why am I holding on to
Let's
these?
start off by
Okay,
talking
you guys-
about how good it was.
You guys.
Yes.
I like the energy of your
Yes.
playlist.
Oh, good.
I felt a lot of energy because I can get kind of Tomasic, I guess you could say. So it takes me a little bit to like get up and get moving. And so I really like the energy of your playlist. I thought it was like higher power. I thought it would also be really great for like a power fusion class.
Yes.
So that's what I was thinking the whole time, man. This would be really great for a power fusion class. If you ever want to teach power fusion, that would be awesome.
Yeah. And if I was like, I was thinking too, like, with your music, I would feel like, if I'm struggling to go to practice, if I'm struggling to, I want to feel motivated again. I want to feel like amped up again.
Right.
I'm like, I'm going to.
Going to that one.
Really motivational.
That's so
Yes.
funny.
Yeah.
Okay.
So like, amp me back up.
guys
Put
are
me,
so
bring me
nice.
back in, you know?
Okay.
And then I guess probably just in your anticipation. I was gonna
I
say
just
like
know.
as far as improvements, I felt like there were a lot of lyrics.
Yeah.
It was hard for me at times to connect
To focus.
and to focus. I
Okay.
did feel slightly distracted. I thought
Yeah.
keep that upbeat rhythm going
Right.
that you had in a lot of it, and then maybe pick songs that are similar that have less lyrics, or maybe even like pick artists who are not English. You know what I mean?
That's true.
Yeah, because there's a lot of yoga music out there that is not English. So many different bands.
I totally agree.
Yeah.
Totally agree.
Yeah, but with that, like, it's also like, I don't know, I mean, it's nice to have that, but I think it's having that balance that, you know,
I agree.
of tying in all the different types of yoga teachers, you know,
Yeah, that balance. in the
creating more
playlist.
mysticism.
Yes.
What about like the end? Well, the Hallelujah song, do you remember?
Oh, that
Do you
was my
think that's-
I wrote that down as a consideration for
Like it might be too.
maybe substituting. It's a very powerful song.
It is.
And it's a lot to think about when you're trying to surrender into Shavasana.
Totally makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay.
Maybe some softer tones, less lyrics.
Friends, if we can wrap it up. Where we're at, come back.
I don't think, did you,
I think
have
she
you
was just
created a
listening in.
playlist, Sam?
No, I haven't gotten that far.
Okay.
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 You didn't want anything.
Awesome. I've usurped you, Sam. You're coming with me. You're coming with me. Okay. I didn't get a chance to text her. Remind me to text Rebecca. Okay.
Liz, I'm sorry. I felt like I lured you. I like hyped up the brother room. I was like, no, really. It was just like, okay, it's very
Okay. So
confusing.
how did that go, friends? Tell me more about that. Like the student coming out. How was class? Good. Got it. So I'll just keep doing that forever. Amy.
I have something to say. I think it's really nice to be able to give feedback when the receiver is receiving. You know, like approachable, open. I know it goes both ways, you know, because you have to think about how you're approaching it as the giver, but it's also, they work together, really. You know, to see-
Yes.
It's vital for both parties to be doing their part in order to grow, you know, as the giver and as the receiver.
Yeah.
It felt really nice to give feedback and they receive it so well, like with grace.
Yeah. Oh,
So-
that's the name of this workshop.
Yeah.
Actually, giving and receiving feedback with grace. That's also like teaching yoga though, right? Because the student has to be willing to learn. And the teacher, you know, yeah, has to be open to what that might be. And it's symbiotic in the same way.
So I'll be the first to admit that I definitely could use a little work on giving feedback in a nicer way.
Oh, yeah? You're the first to admit it? What does that mean? Like,
I don't know why I said that.
oh, okay.
I just need to say it for myself.
Yeah,
But,
yeah,
like,
good.
I'm very like blunt sometimes.
Oh,
I was
okay.
Raised in a very blunt.
Got
family.
you.
Not
So you
because
need
I
to work on
shouldn't be.
softening specifically.
Yeah.
See what I did there? That's how we get to the specifics. That's how we get to the
Oh.
specifics. Because you just kind of threw this, like blanket statement. I'll be the first to say, but what did you mean? You need to soften. Yeah.
I need to
Okay.
soften.
I can relate to that.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Huh? Wait, what'd you say?
Oh, I can relate to that myself.
Oh.
Like that's
Thought you
always
said I
been
could
my,
see that. I was like,
no. That's always been my, like I used to, yeah.
Yeah, so I definitely need to work on, a softer approach. And, also on the receiving end, I can be a little defensive sometimes too. And I think I need, and that's part of maybe the walls that I put up to like protect myself, but I think it would be more beneficial, like you said before, to just tear down the walls and be open to receiving that feedback and like actually hear that person, It's one thing to hear feedback and it's a whole other thing to like actually listen and take that feedback.
Yeah, where your brain is just thinking, are we done yet? So I can go versus, oh, this is really good stuff for me.
Yeah.
But what you said about softening, this is interesting. And I want to get into this just a little bit because for me, and I wonder if this is different or similar for you. So for me, it was a function of acting differently because of a lack of empathy. So where I have such low empathy for myself, where if like I don't do a good job, it's like and I'm really hard on myself. So then when I give feedback to other people, I just don't even realize that that's a step of like being nice first. It's just like you screwed this up, and I thought you'd want to know you suck. Just so you know, because I would want to know, right? Like, and then they're like crushed, and you're like, what? I just did the thing I would do to myself. I'm just talking like how my self-talk goes, right?
Exactly.
Are you feeling that?
But like in a different way, and I kind of just have like an aha moment. So I can be very blunt in my feedback, and I have been working on softening quite a bit. So like military, right? It's not all blunt feedback, but it is more like straightforward, and transactional. But I have these new lieutenants who I do just want to be like. And they do, right? But like,
But let me guess, they're not open to, they don't want to grow and develop themselves. They're like, this is what it is, like it or not, right?
yeah, so that's part of it, right?
Right.
And then like they aren't used to getting that type of feedback, and I'm like, why am I used to giving feedback like that? And this is good because I'm transitioning in the civilian world, right? Like not everyone has lives on the line. But like in my previous job, because like I'm working in admissions right now at the academy, it's very soft and cozy and kittens. But before that, like that is not what I did.
Right.
And if you F something up, like it's not good.
Yeah.
Something's breaking, something's dying.
Yeah.
It's not okay. So
Yeah.
I'm gonna give you blunt feedback.
Yeah.
And
So
they just graduated college. They haven't been in that situation.
I want to stop you, and I want to bring this into this context.
Yeah, so that is that, like for them, they don't have the same context as I do, and not everyone's gonna have the same context as you. So like we have to learn how to communicate differently to get the same point across and provide feedback, because like that's what I'm having to do with them. Like I can't expect them to have the same context as me. One, just because they're just completely different human beings, right? So they require softening.
And what we're doing here is not life or death.
No.
But like that's kind of how I used to give feedback. I'd be like, because but I had a chip on my shoulder. We were coming up. We're a donation-based yoga studio. I had a chip on my shoulder about wanting to prove to the public at large that you don't have to pay exorbitant fees for the quality to be equal or greater than. That because a lot of times we have a thing called perceived value, right? Like we do the thing, sociologists know that if you spend too much on a car, and then you found out your friend bought the same car and they paid $2,000 less, you will look for reasons why your car is better. And so people go to more expensive yoga studios. This is an operating value for them. They go, well, I'm paying more, so I know it's better yoga. And so for the first decade of Cambio's life, I was like, oh, hell no, we're going to be the best yoga and we're going to be accessible. So for me, that's why I made so many young teachers cry, because it was life or death. I was like, we gotta be the best, you know. Oh, sorry. The yin class, I know.
They don't have any music tonight.
No,
so-
I know. So, but I think that, you know, there's a way to channel that passion in a way where rather than it being like a force of fire on them, it can be something to illuminate something between the two of you to learn from, right? Oh, thanks. Okay, so who else? Anybody else want to share? Carly?
Well, I was gonna say, like, I feel like I'm the opposite almost, like, it's hard for me to receive feedback because I take it personally, like, what do
Thank you.
have-
This is, by the way, we haven't talked about this. This is the most common thing to have happen. And why though? Why do we do that? No, we've got to figure out why. We can't go home tonight. Okay, so you think it has something to do with people pleasing?
Because I don't know how to give feedback, and there was a class I took a couple weeks ago, and I wanted to give some like constructive feedback, and I just didn't know how, and like, the teacher has no idea that I wanted to give that.
I feel like your answer about people pleasing is pointing us in a direction, but I don't think it's all the way there.
Yeah, I don't know, because even like a couple weeks ago, my partner and I got in like a silly little argument, and he said to me, like, his exact words were, I need to be able to state my opinion without you taking it personally. And I was like,
Yeah, yeah.
So I've been working
I
on
have a hard time with anything like that.
Yeah.
I will go straight to like, I want to cry.
So you internalize it. Okay.
Like earlier when you got a little
He-
fired up about the. you know, I'm gonna say
Engagement?
honest,
Oh, then
I seriously wanted to cry.
Oh, I'm
Like,
sorry.
just- No.
It's
not.
yeah.
I'm just taking things so personally, but then I'm like, well, that just means I can't.
Yes,
too.
that's great.
And I'm a little frustrated with myself because I'm like, you need to be more in this.
Put it up. There you go, girl. All right, yeah, and I do want to end tonight with my expectations for you on Teach Out Day, because I'm not going to see you again until Teach Out Day. But don't believe for a second, I'm not going to come in with high standards for y'all. You're going to be the best, you know, teachers who've never taught a class in Colorado Springs, in Colorado. And I'm dead serious. I know that's funny, but that's what's going to happen is your first class on Teach Out Day is going to be, it's going to be par excellence, you know, even if it's a nightmare. Does that make sense? We'll talk about that. Sarah, internalizing it. So what happens sometimes, like, this is a common thing, right? We may say something to somebody, and we need to understand this when we're talking about softening feedback, that we may say to somebody, so something benign, like somebody's in plank, right? And even if it's our student, feedback happens even with our cues. And we say, Rhonda, your hips are sagging, you know, straighten your plank out, right? What Rhonda hears is, oh, I'm saggy, or my hips are too big, or they're heavy, or I'm weak, right? And that's the thing that why we have to get clear about our cues. Our cues, I'm telling you, as beginner teachers, once you get everything rote, the sequence, everything in position, I wouldn't even mess with changing the sequence for a long, long time. Because what really your pay dirt, where your work really is about getting really specific to your cues each and every time. I used to teach the same exact sequence every Monday, 3:30 for 3.5 years. And I can tell you, I started that right from the get-go out of teacher training. That was one of the best things that got me way better, way faster, because I didn't have to think about anything but my cues. And as a beginner teacher, that is the most powerful thing that you can sharpen. The most powerful tool and resource you can sharpen is your cues. So don't try to think, oh my gosh, but my students will get bored if I teach the same sequence. No. So when I'm talking about Rhonda, right, we've got to be cognizant about, and you're going to talk about the language of inclusivity with Kafka coming up soon, but sometimes we get that student that leaves class, right? And they may never come back. Maybe you said something that upset or offended them in a way that that you didn't mean, that could have been taken a wrong way because people internalize things. So I guess we should just walk on eggshells, right? No, that's not the takeaway. But I think this is a good thing for us to be cognizant about. If we're internalizing stuff And we're the ones putting ourselves out there. And they're the ones who are there for just themselves. There's probably a good chance that there's somebody in there who that we have to just be mindful of and be like, there's been multiple times like with Liz tonight. I was so glad it happened because now I get to use this and be like, you know, I have had teacher trainees where I put my foot in my mouth and said something that wasn't exactly kind and put the truth before the kindness of how I felt when it didn't really serve the function of anything. And then that person is now, they don't feel a sense of respect with me anymore because they see that I'm an emotional person or whatever it might be, right? And so like Liz accepting my apology, or at least she said she accepted my apology.
I do.
You know, that's something that I had to learn quickly is to be like, oh, knowing when you're out of line with the things. And so that's a big difference between saying, you know, you forgot left side. Oh my God, I'm out of line. I'm a terrible teacher, right? And I should never teach. That's not empathy turning towards compassion. That is resistance, fear, turning into imposter syndrome, turning into paralysis, turning into self-defeating negative talk, right? Versus like, oh crap, maybe I said something that offended one of my students. And I don't really know if I did offend you or not, but the point is I've offended enough people in my life to know that I offend people. And so, you know, I'm better safe than sorry. So, and I am sorry. I'm better safe and sorry. So anyway, this is good to know, but I really like to get to this point of like, maybe it's not so important that we understand why we internalize things so much as that we understand that people just do. People do, and we're not always going to get it right. We're not always going to get it perfect. But just the same way, like if a student says, oh, I didn't like class, and then they apologize to you about hurting your feelings, you know, same way I can apologize to Liz about being rude to her earlier.
Also, it takes a lot more courage
To-
to apologize. Than,
And it's a form of feedback, isn't it? That's feed forward. Like I'm giving it to myself, being like, oh, I was out of line with that comment. I feel bad. And so I'm going to go home and flog myself. No, but that's the whole thing is when you right size the compassionate act with what happened, that I can no longer change the fact that I was a shithead, right? But what I can do is apologize, and maybe she doesn't accept it, but at the end of the day, now I have to let go of it. And that's a way we can kind of start to work through processing things rather than internalizing things. Because what we think, internalizing, we think is processing, but what we're actually doing is ruminating, aren't we? We're rolling it over and it never goes anywhere. Huh?
Fretting.
Yeah.
Fretting?
Fretting.
Yeah. Liz, you're going to say something.
Oh, well, it's kind of a weird point to ask, but I was just gonna say, like, could everything involving feedback, like receiving and giving, be related to like the root chakra in a way?
It can. And the internalizing and the shutting down, absolutely. So that's why we have to be so delicate in the way that we say, you know, your playlist sucked, or your playlist didn't work for me, versus I didn't really, you know, that Paul Simon song was a bit distracting for me in Shavasana, right? That gets the conversation about the thing other than the person. We don't put them on blast, because when we put the person on blast, they jump into flight, or freeze. And that's the productiveness of the conversation goes downhill really quickly as soon as somebody starts fighting me back, when they start making reasons of why they did the things they did. And you're like, oh, I thought we were doing so. I thought this was a different conversation here. But you may have started that. You may have put them in the defensive mode, right? And so that's when we know it's not productive. Are you going to say something? Okay.
Sorry, I just.
You're not interrupted.
I observed Amy's class one time, and where she was like, please, like, give me feedback.
Yeah.
Like, I want it. And I was like, I'm gonna get to that point where I'm like, please, because right now I'm like,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
obviously feedback helps you feel, but I was just like, I want to get to that point where I'm like, please give me feedback.
Well, and so for those of you who take the stuff personal really easily, the best thing you can do is be giving feedback, because then you learn how to navigate the territory of these conversations in a way that creates a kind of a holographic experience that you can then flip around when you're in the receiving situation. And so giving feedback is really important to know when, Liz, as you said, if somebody's gone into a stress response, what we can do is say, hey, maybe we should take a break. Did I say something that upset you? Tell me how you're feeling right now. Give them a chance to not internalize, to stop that, and to actually let it go and to go the other way, or maybe taking a break.
I used to, well, I still struggle with feedback, but I could definitely, I was a manager for a little bit at the restaurant I used to work at. And so I had to be okay with getting feedback. And what I realized about myself is that I was seeing feedback as very confrontational. I thought speaking to somebody, an employee about something was, drama or confrontational.
Yeah.
And you don't have to view it that way. So getting that practice allows you to see it's not confrontational. It's just assertive, and as long as it's coming from a good place.
One of the, and again, putting the problem instead of between us, we share the perspective around how to find solution-oriented mindset around that. That will diffuse any kind of sense of confrontation, generally speaking. But another really great way, if you can't quite figure out how to do that with somebody, to kind of diffuse some of the tension you feel building in them, because they're just like, oh, I'm on trial right now. Am I bad or good? Am I bad or good? One really great thing that you can give them power in the situation by doing it, and Laura Lance does this really well, I learned this from her, is saying, so what was your why, or what was your intention, or what did you mean to do when you did this? And that gives them a chance to, instead of you saying, here's a problem, and then they ultimately then have to explain themselves, you just give them a chance to explain themselves. And then in the explaining, you get to interject further questioning around it in a way where really, it's not putting them in a corner, Last thing on shit sandwiches. So here's the thing to be wary of shit sandwiches. They can work. They work because they're disarming, and it ends the conversation on a good note, potentially, right? And it gets the truth out there. So for some people, shit sandwiches really work well. Because some people, like people pleaser, like somebody like Carly, it might be necessary. Like if I know you're a people pleaser, like I may want to start with the good things that bookend the thing to work on around how you really did please the people, right? And so like a mentor, somebody you would work with would get to know that about you over time. And then when you realize that they're doing that for you, it creates a vested interest of trust and safety, and you just get so much deeper into the work. But some they don't work if you are using it to take yourself off the hook for having a hard conversation, and you're just glossing over the shit part of the sandwich, right? By saying, boy, you really took great care of us. That was perfect timing and everything like that. I hated the playlist, but thank you for class. I really, thank you so much. I felt held. So it's like oftentimes people use the shit sandwich as a way to like mention it without talking about it. So just understand that the constructive aspect of feedback, the reason you're bringing it up is to talk about the solutions to it. And by the way, the best way to do that is come together around the solution. Okay. So any questions over giving or receiving feedback? You have a handout that just basically says receiving feedback, listen with an open mind, pay careful attention, take notes, because when you're writing this stuff down, when you say, Rhonda, your hips were sagging in plank, and then I write that down, and then later on, you're like, Rhonda, why are you so pissed? You said, because you said I was saggy. I'm like, what'd you write down, Rhonda? Oh, well, that's not what you said, because I actually wrote down what you said, right? So specific details, really listening with an open mind, taking responsibility for your own part, rather than getting defensive and be like, oh, I did miss the left side, or, ooh, yeah, I can see why that warrior one there didn't work for you. Okay, that's good to know, right? It doesn't mean you're never going to put warrior one there again, or whatever it might be, right? always ask questions about the feedback, so you're making sure you're hearing them right. So I'm sorry, Amy, are you saying I'm saggy? You know, try it on. I already mentioned that one, trying it on, even especially for those things that feel maybe a little outside your comfort zone. Say, you know, oh, I'm gonna try that. Obviously, if it's not outside your comfort zone, you don't have to try it on. It's just there. Not all feedback must be taken on, especially the beginner, the Dunning-Kruger, the neophyte. You know, they come out of class and they're just like, I don't like music when I do yoga. Well, okay, that's not going to change anything, right? Show gratitude for the feedback. So thank the person, not only, you know, right when you give feedback, just say thank you for taking the time to talk with me. It's really important that you're taking the time to become a better teacher. That's really special to be part of this with you. And you go, well, thank you. I mean, I really appreciate the gift you're giving me by investing in me to develop myself in my growth as a teacher. That's not a common thing, seriously. And then take classes from teachers you want to be like, and ask teachers that you really respect and admire questions about areas that you want to grow in yourself. But also take teachers and styles that you don't like, because you also will learn a lot from them. All right. Okay, just remember it's a practice. Okay, here's your homework for this, and then we'll just call it a night. Is this 3 hours or 2 hours?
2.
That was a quick answer. She's like, no, it's 2. It's 2. It's 2.
2. Sorry.
I'm pretty sure it's 3 now, Andrea. No, I'm just kidding. All right. Oh, actually, before I give you your homework, we're going to do a quick review. Okay. What's the first yama?
Oh, no.
Shh. We got to be quiet now. We got to be quiet. Ahimsa. What is it? Everyone needs to say the word ahimsa. Ahimsa. What does it mean? Non-violence specifically, right? Do no violence, especially when you know something is causing harm. That's when we're out of line, right? It's one thing to be ignorant about the violence you're causing or harm. Okay, what's the next one? Satya. Truthfulness specifically. Truth. And it's important to understand that ahimsa comes before that, but we could talk a lot about the ways in which those two conflict, right? Truth and kindness, or nonviolence. Okay, what's the next one? Brahmacharya. Yeah. What is brahmacharya? Say? Unity, oneness? Is that what I said?
Like teacher, or not teacher, student.
Yeah. Yeah. Following the path. Being just, I call it ABL, being able. And ABL is an acronym for, like, if you notice I like my acronyms? PEP, PER, and ABL. This is the last one I'll give you, I promise. No more than 3 acronyms a night. Able means always be learning. That's brahmacharya. Always be learning. For the sake of service, not for the sake of self-sanctity, right? Okay. What's next? Steya. What is? Non-stealing. Last yama, parigraha, where this is really where we start practicing the empathy. Because when we're not empathetic, we're holding on to our expectations, holding on to our fears, holding on to how we wanted the class to go for them. That is what makes us internalize the stuff, right? Is a tight grasp on what we hope, yes, of the outcome. The game you said earlier. Okay. Niyamas. Such as what? Purity of what? What else? Huh? Thought, word, action. Okay. It's all the ways in which we are moving towards our character and our destiny. in this world, right? We want to purify that. And that doesn't mean we're purifying that based off of the principles of the yamas. We're not purifying that meaning like I can't have, sexual thoughts, or I can't want money or have desires, right? This is not what purity means. Sometimes people get sacrosanct about what purity means in this. Purity really means letting go of selfishness. So the thoughts, the words, and the actions are in line with the yamas. They're helpful to other people. They're of service to other people. They're kind. They're true. Yeah. Okay, next one. Santosha, which is what? And what's the operating value here? Contentment in terms of just being like, cool, everything is just the way it is. I'm good with that. Huh? Gratitude, but also like doing your best, right? Finding contentment that your best is enough, that you are enough, that you're complete, you're whole, and you're perfect. Okay, next. Tapas, which is what? Discipline specifically to, now this is where things start to get interesting, right? With the yamas and niyamas, because what we're doing with the discipline is we're sparking the spiritual fire with discipline, right? We're now putting so much discipline into work that we're actually intentionally transforming our life. That is the purpose of the discipline. So we're creating alchemy, an alchemical process. Okay. So it's not just discipline for discipline's sake, right? That sucks. That just sucks when somebody's just up your butt. You know what I mean? But if you're doing it for, tapas a lot of times is connected to sacrifice. So everything up to this point is about service, right? Up to contentment. The contentment should be a result of service, really well done service. Clear thoughts, words, and actions done in guideline by the yamas leads to contentment. And then when we find that contentment, the work is not done. That's when we actually dig down and go deeper. And this is about self-sacrifice. What are you willing to give up at this point? Because you've grown so much through service to others and through this gift of contentment. You don't need other bullshit, especially the carrot at the end of the stick, right? Okay, next one. Svayaya. It's a two-sided coin of study. What is the first side? What am I doing here? Self-inquiry, like existential self-inquiry required for the yogic practice. Those three components of philosophy, psychology, and practice, there's no circulation if you're not continually willing to ask and recognize that you don't know. Because you won't ask if you don't know, you don't know. But by the way, if you're not willing to do that, you have no business teaching yoga. And as far as imposter syndrome, by the time you're done with this 200-hour, you have every right bestowed upon you by the authority invested in me to teach yoga, as long as that you are willing to ask that deep question. And it's not to ask the question to receive an answer. That is not the purpose of this question. The question is to broaden yourself, to broaden your worldview and your experience of the numinous, awe, divine. That, yeah. Remember that word last night? Yeah, okay. And then now, what's the other side of the coin of Svadhyaya? Yeah, studying those who've gone, studying the words, the poems, the trail, the treasure map left by those who have, who've dedicated their life to the greatness of, finding that grace in their own life, and were kind enough to write some of it down for you. You know what I mean? Like, what a huge waste would that be if you got to the end of life and you're just like, God, but I didn't get my answer. And it's like, well, I left it revealed through the hearts of all these men and women that wrote it down for you to read. Did you pick up any of those books and take quiet contemplation and reflection with those? No, I didn't do that. Watch football all Sundays. That's football day. Okay. So that's the importance of Svadhyaya. And then last one. Ishvara Pranidhana. which is to then show reverence in your life. To not just be like, I mean, yes. So the first tenet of Cambio teacher training is don't take our word for it, go find out for yourself. Like when we're talking about mystical experiences, and I said, if you ohm with your heart and soul for 8 minutes, you're going to have a mystical experience. Nathan said, well, I don't know if I believe this. He went home and did it. He had a mystical experience. That's beautiful, but that's not what this means. Is Vajrapana Daha. I'm not saying take my word for it, or take anybody else's word for it, but there must be something in your life that is greater than you, that are you willing to not only surrender your ego and your will to, but also to show benevolent reverence, honor, and respect to. And by the way, that thing exists in each one of you. It exists in between all of us and beyond all of us. And that is that fundamental philosophy of yoga. And some people call it the Tao. Some people call it Zen. Some people call it God. Some people call it heaven. Some people, there's many, many, many names for this. But it's accessible to you. And it is like the thing. When people say, oh, how do they stay looking so young? Or as soon as you started yoga, you look all fresh. And because you're tapping into that well when you do that, whether you're conscious of it or not. The more conscious you become of doing it, though, the more profound that relationship gets, the more intimate it gets. So the homework, 8 o'clock, homework. Or is it 3 hours? Okay. Homework is to well, first of all, every time you practice teach with somebody else from now on, for the next 3 weeks, you have to give feedback in this way, 3 things, and talk to them, create the conversation around the teaching metrics specifically. What were you focusing on this time? So the one thing to work on, maybe it was obvious, the sequencing, right? The thing that they did really well, where does it fit in with that metrics? But here's the fun part, is that other consideration is, what are they working on? What are they focusing on? Or where's their blind spot in those metrics? Where are they not really stepping up the way in which they're using the presence of their own body in teaching, right? Or their voice. So that's an ongoing bit of homework. You don't have to turn anything and reflect on anything with it. But I'd like you all to partner up with somebody and then exchange your bios and then read your bios. And this is kind of done like, so say if Christina is my partner, we're going to set it, we'll say by the next time there's flex time, I think it's in Sunday. Yeah. So by the end of Sunday, I'll have read Christina's bio. She'll have read mine, and we're ready to have a 15-minute, say 10 to 20 minute conversation going through this, using this document, the receiving and giving feedback with grace. So you're really focusing on practicing these precepts as you go over the bio. Okay. So that means the person giving is giving 3 things, but the person receiving actually has a lot more to focus on. If you notice that person giving, what you're really doing is you're taking 3 things, and it's really how you give it is where the art form of it comes in. But the receiving, there's a lot of things listed there. And I really want you to start focusing on that, because when you put those at the forefront of your attention, it will really distract you from internalizing it. Because you'll be like, oh, wait, this is actually where I'm doing with this information. I'm plugging it in here rather than feeding self-doubt or whatever it might be. Okay, let's do our word. Is that good enough? Questions on the homework? Okay, you have a week. Do you want to, do you got your own partner? You want to figure out your own partners? You want partner you got? You'll figure it out. I'm going to trust you all to figure that out. Okay. Cool. Are we getting people online together? All right. So let's do the word. Friends online, I'll give you the first word tonight, since you've been so patient. With the pace of this, I haven't always been as attentive to you all tonight, but we had a lot to get through in 2 hours, since Andrea said we only had 2 hours. Okay. Sam, would you lead us off? What's your word of the night?
Happy.
Actually, let me step back. I want you to just think about what your takeaway is for tonight. What is the biggest takeaway? What's the most important thing you got from this conversation tonight? Liz is like, an apology, you jerk. No, but think about that. And then I want your word to reflect the thing that you're taking away from tonight. Okay. Okay. So Sam, do you want to do the same one or do you have a different one?
I like happy, but I'll do action.
Okay, cool. Sarah June.
Feedback.
Katie.
Gratitude.
Gratitude. Thank you. Erin.
Panic. That's how I.
I think so. Okay. Let's go this way.
Grace.
Grace.
Vulnerability.
Vulnerability.
I'm gonna say learning, but it doesn't make sense. Learning.
Learning. Growth.
Receive.
Receive. Evolve. Parigraha. Devotion. Empathy.
Perspective.
Perspective.
Tapas.
Tapas. That was gonna be Sarah. Tapas. Erica?
Scripture.
Scripture. Okay. So hey, this is my last time with you till teach out. I just want to say thank you. Great job. Keep it going. Don't pause. Don't hesitate to reach out. If you need anything from us to make sure that you feel good going into the last, well, you may not feel good, but if you need any support going into the last week, yeah, thanks for getting there tonight. You know, I feel like you guys tapped into the reserves. I know you're tired. I know you've worked hard tonight, but this last 3 weeks, it's going to be over soon. So do what you can to just really soak it up as much as you can, because this is a special time. And this is a special group. I have loved working with you all. Like, this has been such an absolute joy and such a treat. So thank you.
Yeah.
No, this is a cool group. I'm going to miss you. I'm going to miss this when it's over. It's going to be a bit hard when it's over for me. And I've learned a lot. I've learned so much from y'all. So thank you. And next time I see you though, I'll ask you about the biofeedback and maybe do a little write-up on the classroom. Just say how it went for you. I feel like I have something. Oh, I do have one last thing. Exit very quietly. Exit very quietly. Okay, because in the end class, that wall's super thin. All right, thank you. Thank you guys. Erin, I like your hair, by the way. It's cool.